You're listening to Why We Do What We Do. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your forensically failing host, Abraham.
And I'm your illegible host, Shane.
There you go. We're a psychology podcast. We talk about all of the things that people do and why they do them. And therefore, we're a psychology podcast, as I said. And so if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Thanks for being here. We sometimes talk about what animals do and concepts, and sometimes we tackle crime.
We do, and today is not how we tackle crime, but we are going to talk about how people try to tackle crime and how it is ultimately been debunked real hard.
You could subtitle this episode, How to Not Solve a Crime.
Yeah.
In addition to that, and actually before we get into that, we need to acknowledge that if you're joining us on the day that this publishes, great. Thanks. That's all fantastic.
Yeah, real cool.
We'd like to wish you a happy Save the Eagles Day, because that is what January 10th happens to be.
Yeah, not the Philadelphia Eagles. We could care less about them, but just Eagles in general. The rest, like actual important Eagles. I just upset our entire Pennsylvania crowd.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Damn.
That's fine. It's also Houseplant Appreciation Day, so make sure you water your plants and make sure they get direct or indirect sunlight, depending on the type of plant they are.
It is also Take the Stairs Day, which I appreciate. I much prefer stairs to escalators or elevators if I can.
Yeah, that's fair. It's also Peculiar People Day, so I feel like you all are among those folks, so welcome.
Yes, wear your watermelon hats today. It is also National Cut Your Energy Costs Day, largely, I think, by investing in things like LED lights and, not leaving the refrigerator door open all day to cool your house type stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to have to chase it down the road if your refrigerator's running too much. So
that's right.
It's Bittersweet Chocolate Day, which I think you and I are both fans of.
Yes, definitely. It is George Foreman's birthday today. So happy birthday, George Foreman, I guess.
I think the only reason we brought him up is because of the grill. Like, he has a grill. So, and he's got like 8 kids named George. So it's also Obesity Awareness Week. So definitely an important thing, especially in the United States. Maybe not so much across the world, but definitely here in the U.S., we got to pay attention to this a little bit more.
And George Foreman's birthday and Obesity Awareness Week may have some overlap. Who knows? But here we are. We're not talking about George Foreman or any of those other holidays. We're actually talking about forensic analysis, where it works, where it doesn't work, and where it really doesn't work.
Yes. So I have a question for you. How is your handwriting?
Bad.
So you and I think, took the same class. I think that's what happens with doctors, where there is a specific class. I don't think people know this, but there's a specific class that you take in your doctoral program that's a handwriting class. It's doctorate handwriting, and it's to purposefully make your handwriting as terrible as possible.
As you're writing, they just shake the table under you. They might push you, move your hands around. However fast you write it, they say do it faster. And if they can read it, then they're like, no, F, try again.
Yeah, that's exactly it. My handwriting is god awful. It is.
Yeah.
I like my handwriting. I think it looks really cool, but people hate my handwriting.
Yeah, that's fair. So penmanship, that's the thing. We've actually talked about versions of penmanship, kind of. We talked about right and left-handedness. I don't know. Anyway, it's a thing. And when we're talking about how to wrap this into forensic analysis, because forensic analysis, for those of you who aren't totally clear what we mean when we say that, refers to the art, if you will, of looking at evidence of crime scenes, things related to criminal activity, and trying to understand what can be learned from the evidence, from the scene itself.
Sure.
Otherwise, looking at things like, if you ever watched Dexter, he did blood splatter analysis, which is like, there's actually legitimately like people who do blood splatter analysis as a way to try and solve crimes. They'll also hire psychics and people with dowsing rods, and they'll also do things like collect DNA samples. So the spectrum of forensic analysis science and what it entails is vast, to say the least.
Yes, and I think lumping all of that underneath the banner of science is a little bit cavalier. So we are not going to do that today, but I think it is important to know that, like, there are legitimate sciences underneath forensic analysis, and then there's handwriting analysis. And we are going to kind of talk about how those things are separate and how we respect the ones that are doing actual scientific analysis, and how we have to just kind of take a moment to debunk what people spend a lot of time and resources on. Because I think ultimately our value is that we don't want to spend time or waste time on something that is not useful when there might be a useful or better tool that's going to help accomplish the thing that we're trying to accomplish. And especially in the forensic world where time is of the essence, we don't want to waste time on psychics and other practices that do not yield actual results.
Yes, exactly. So today, as we sort of already alluded to, is we're talking about handwriting. We're talking about handwriting analysis in forensic detective work as a way to narrow down your suspect pool, to create a profile about your suspect, to learn something about the people who were involved in whatever crime scene or criminal activity has taken place, and therefore use that to inform what the police are doing. And
yes,
as we've already said, they have a limited window of opportunity to do their investigating, to try and resolve a crime of some sort. And so we want them to be using any and all tools that are going to help them do that job. And we're not talking about one of those tools today. Instead, we're talking about this handwriting analysis thing.
Right. We want to see efficient, effective, and accurate is what we want to really see in this space. And this is not any of those things.
We've been sort of pontificating, I think, largely on what we're talking about. So let's just dive into our topic. To clarify, so we're talking about handwriting analysis, and this is different from forensic handwriting analysis, which are often used to analyze patterns and determine authorship. What we're talking about is the use of handwriting to describe someone's psychological profile.
Yes.
I think it's important to note that the majority of searches that we did as part of the preparation for this, that Shane was doing in his preparation for this, there seems to be a lack of clear definition between the two, because if you're trying to describe someone's psychological profile by looking at their handwriting, that's very much in the vein of someone who is doing forensic investigation, who is trying to describe the psychological profile of a person of interest, right?
Right.
And so although we say we're not talking about forensic although we say that it's different, how it's different is unclear to even the people who seem to be doing it, or at least the way that has been talked about, so that when we read it, it seems like they do not have a clarity on it.
The way that I understood it as I was going through this is there's like three different camps. There are the folks that use it for medical diagnoses, and that's a fairly new camp in the handwriting analysis space, specifically looking at like neurodegenerative disorders, and we'll talk about that later.
Right.
There is the group that looks at like authorship and like something that's pretty consistent. Like, can I match handwriting to somebody else's handwriting? Like, and that seems to be pretty objective based on certain things. But what we're talking about is the practice where you are going, I can tell that the way that you write your T's means that you're sarcastic. And that is the part that we're talking about today, is that space where it's going, I can tell your personality based on the way that you write.
Right.
That's the part that we're trying to debunk a little bit. Now, that practice is called graphology. Graphology is the practice of analyzing someone's handwriting to determine someone's personality traits. And to kind of give you an idea of where this comes from, grapho is from the Greek term for writing, and logos is from the Greek meaning related to discussion or theory. So any ologies have that logos kind of component to it.
Right. Like psychologos.
Yeah, we're a psychologos podcast.
The origin of handwriting analysis began as far back as 1575, at least as far back as we've found evidence for it, which means it probably precedes that, because this is the publication of, here's some Latin, I think, Examen de Ingenios para las Ciencias.
I think it's Italian or Spanish.
Okay. Then I did not deliver that anywhere close to real. Actually, no matter what language I was trying to do. That's my American English version of reading that.
Sure.
This was written by Juan Huerte de San Juan. Wow, that's a long name. However, there is some debate on that too.
Yeah, so since Americans love to rewrite history from time to time, it is argued that Camillo Baldi actually wrote the first handwriting analysis book in 1622. And that was called, and this is, I believe, Italian, Tratto come da una lettera missive si conoscano la natura e qualità dello scrittore.
Everyone's going to definitely remember that title.
It's definitely like just rolls off the tongue. And also, again, that was my very American white enunciation of that. But this is considered to be the first handwriting analysis in American graphology, the first book on handwriting analysis. So the Italian book on graphology is the first American, like the kind of the origin story of this in 1622.
Okay. So basically, like, it was written in presumably Italian, but it was the thing that kicked off handwriting analysis in America. That
and
I'm understanding. Okay,
that's how I'm understanding it too. But I would also like to point out that just like we couldn't figure out, like they couldn't agree on what handwriting analysis was across the board, they can't even agree on the origin.
fair.
So there's one book in 1575. There's one book in 1622. We know that these are kind of important hallmarks of the handwriting analysis history.
Okay. And more of that history is that graphology, as we know it, was eventually founded as a quote unquote official practice by Jean Hippolyte Michon after he began to publish many of his works on the subject. He eventually went on to found the Société Graphologique in 1871, giving handwriting analysis its official organization, alongside the Society Phrenology, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe sharing some values and methods.
Yes, exactly. So the use of handwriting analyses became quite popular, and with psychologist Fred Binet describing graphology as, quote, the science of the future. I always love that kind of like tagline. It's the future.
Right.
And how people kind of would do that. They still do that. But after World War I, there was a massive spread of graphology across the U.S. and across Europe, with the eventual founding of the American Graphoanalysis Society in 1929. I don't know about you. I think I would really enjoy being part of some society in that time period. Like, I want to be part of a group that's got that kind of 1920s namesake, like, you know, the American Psychology Society of America or something like that. I feel like it just has like a certain ring to it. Like, it's very Art Deco almost, you know, like, I don't know. I feel like it's got like a ring or a vibe.
Going to be the Bootleggers Society.
I would love that. That would be great.
Apparently, this caused a little bit of a tiff between groups in the graphology world. The formation of the society split practitioners between graphoanalysis or holistic graphology. Not unlike, I would imagine, the distinction between like medicine as practiced by science-based medicine doctors and like holistic and natural path type doctors in the United States and other places in the world.
Sure.
But anyway, so you might ask the difference between graphoanalysis and holistic graphology. The difference here is that in graphoanalysis, this is a scientific, quote unquote, scientific system of identifying and assessing the character and personality of an individual through a detailed study of their penmanship or their handwriting, whatever it might be, versus holistic graphology, which is an analysis based on form, movement, and use of space. At least that's how they're supposed to be distinguished.
Sure.
Calling that one of those scientific is pretty generous.
Yeah, and also there's still not really a great distinction between the two. I think both of them are still trying to do an analysis based on something and come to a conclusion based on a thing that is not necessarily related to that thing. Like, they are trying to determine personality traits based on handwriting, and I don't think that's they're just not really linked. And you'll kind of see as we unpack this. I think it's also important, though, like, as we look at graphoanalysis and holistic graphology and kind of their ultimate goal is to figure out what it means about you. I think as you listen to this podcast and you listen to ads, it's probably important to figure out what that ad says about you as well.
That one actually kind of works because ads are targeted. So if you just received like an ad for like a casket or something like that, then Google is sending you a warning, would be my guess.
I'll make an argument. The ads that you get on the show are more scientific than what we're talking about today.
I think so. I've been getting, I don't know about you, but when I listen to podcasts, I've been getting a ton of ads about like online casinos. And I'm like,
really?
And I'm like, I have never used an online casino or online gambling in any form. So I'm very confused at why I'm getting all these ads lately.
I get a lot of HelloFresh and BetterHelp is what I've been getting a lot of. So, you know.
BetterHelp is pretty ubiquitous. I think they're pretty much out there. So,
yeah.
All right. Why do people want to do this handwriting analysis thing? What is it used for?
Yeah, so graphologists argue that there are multiple applications for handwriting analyses that can benefit people. And in this section, we're going to talk about each or some of the most common uses that you can see. So you can kind of see what we're dealing with here and what general graphologists that are talking about this specific type of personality-based handwriting analysis they're trying to do. So the first is gender differences. So they use a handwriting analysis to identify gender differences, and it's reported that handwriting analysis can be used to accurately identify gender among handwriting samples. Hartley in 1991 proposed that using handwriting analysis, analysts could predict gender anywhere between 57 and 78% of opportunities. And this was considered a promising study. So given a choice of two, because that's ultimately in 1991, they're looking at a choice of two, right? They're not really spending a lot of time doing, non-binary research at the time.
Absolutely.
So given a choice of two, it's a little better than a coin flip.
Yeah. Well, and 78% would be, I think, enough to say, okay, like you're close enough that there's probably something of accuracy here. But like 57% is about as wrong as you can be, because as we've talked about, when you have a choice between two things and you're trying to guess of the two, like if you're wrong 50% of the time, like if you're wrong more than 50% of the time, then it's still predictive, just in the opposite direction. If it was like 0% correct, that means that every time it told you it was a female handwriting sample, it was a male handwriting sample.
Right.
Like that's what 0% like, and that's reliable enough that you could actually use that. 50% means it is a complete random chance. Like you could not get actually worse than that. I have specifically gone out of my way to show, like, I've seen a wide spectrum of penmanship from the people that I've worked with, populations that I've served, where like you really could not tell what, like, the age, the gender, like it is just whatever that person comes to the table with.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, this one study, further analysis found that with a larger, more robust sample size, identifying gender was closer to 54% of attempts, which, as you said, is effectively a coin flip and as wrong as it could possibly be, or at least as useless as it could possibly be.
Right. So myth one, can handwriting analysis identify gender? Debunked. It cannot. So we know that. Now, on to the second one, employment profiles. So in some companies, handwriting analysis is used to evaluate potential employees to see if they can fit a certain employee psychological profile. They pair up the handwriting analysis with other data like background screenings or demonstration of skills. I don't know how I feel about this. If somebody looked at my handwriting, they'd be like, yeah, we're not going to hire this guy because his handwriting is real bad.
If your job was to like handwrite notes on cards that people would buy so that they could deliver or something like that, then I could understand saying like we need someone with a very specific type of penmanship,
right?
And handwriting that we're going to use for that job. But the vast majority of jobs, that is not what is going on here. So yeah. But that is the question. Someone might ask, well, you can't discriminate based on someone's handwriting. So is it illegal to prevent someone's hire due to their handwriting and the psychological profile that emerges from that handwriting? Only if the employer determines gender, ethnicity, etc. from the handwriting and does not hire based on that standard. So yes, it is legal as long as it is not discriminatory along other features of someone's, I guess, demographics that have been specifically protected by the government.
Right.
So yeah, no companies can do this. They can do a handwriting analysis, determine that you are too, I don't know, nice or mean or something, or that you're likely to be late.
They can literally just say your handwriting sucks.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that is not a thing that is protected.
I thought it was interesting. It's like, they can decide not to hire you based on how bad your handwriting is, but they can't say that your handwriting is bad because you're a male and you can't work here because of that.
Sure.
Like that's the line that it's semantics. Now, there's some handwriting analysts that say that psychoanalysis there's a use with in this area for handwriting analysis. Some counselors or psychotherapists will have actually reported the use or to use this as part of their personality tests. It's not often used in isolation though, and so a lot of the discussions I saw on that talked about how they would include that as part of their overall battery of assessments. It's just kind of added on top of already practiced and kind of scientifically verified tools. So they might do that to kind of get some additional insight or maybe kind of raise some additional questions, but they won't do that to explicitly diagnose somebody or do therapy based on their handwriting.
Speaking of doing therapy based on handwriting, there is some use of handwriting. That sounded like I was teeing up an ad, but I wasn't.
Not yet.
Not yet. There's some use of handwriting in sort of looking at people trying to assess and determine marital compatibility or matchmaking of some sort. used to evaluate everything from sexual expression to how the person might affect another person in a relationship. And the goal of this is that then a marriage is more likely to endure because both partners understand more about each other by doing handwriting analysis, not the classic way of doing this, which is to spend time with a person and get to know them.
So I was going to ask, how would you match up with your partner based on your handwriting?
Well, if the goal is simply to understand that our handwriting is very distinct, then we would go in without the misconception that we both had nice handwriting. But as far as what it tells us about one another, I would think that it would also suggest that we were not particularly compatible, unless, as they say, opposites attract, in which case then we would be.
Same, exactly. That's so great. And the final one that they talk about using is medical diagnosis. And this one's actually pretty controversial because, there are very few diagnoses that have handwriting or penmanship specific symptoms, if at all. And this is where it gets a little bit dicey. It's technically not graphology in the same form as everything else that we've discussed because they're not trying to identify personality traits. What they're trying to look at is like degenerative motor control or an assessment of motor control to determine motor function and whether or not somebody has fine or gross motor movement or a degeneration of that. So handwriting is analyzed, but it's not analyzed for the sake of identifying somebody's personality. Rather, what they're doing is they're really trying to figure out if this person is losing a skill that they've had for some time.
I could see there being, it's not going to be a clear diagnostic tool.
Right.
But it might be a way to look at, are we, as you said, do we see the deterioration of a relatively fluent skill that we think should not be deteriorating unless there's something medical going on?
Right.
So I could see that sort of that argument making some amount of sense.
And that's why it becomes kind of controversial for the graphology folks. Because if it's used in that context, then it's not used to analyze personality, so it's not technically graphology. So, that's why it becomes kind of a unique argument in that space.
That's a fair point.
It's at that point in time, it moves out of the space of graphology and moves into the medical field as part of a battery of tests to determine some other issue.
I'm good with this.
Yeah.
That makes logical sense to me.
Me too.
All right. So, what does our handwriting say about us? What does your handwriting say about you?
Oh, mine says that I'm not patient. I rush through my handwriting. I've learned that I'm apparently very sarcastic through my handwriting, which, it took my handwriting for me to know that. I didn't know that I was sarcastic until I looked at my handwriting from this episode. And I was like, oh my God, I am the most sarcastic person. And it's because of my sharp pointed T-bars is what I've learned.
I see.
It's been a little bit of a journey doing this episode.
I think that my handwriting says that I only write using my non-dominant foot.
So I don't know. I don't know if I shared this with you. I feel like it's fitting for this. I handwrite my grocery list.
Okay.
And I went to the grocery store a couple of weeks ago, and I could not read what was on my my own handwritten grocery list, and it took me 30 minutes to figure out that I'd written bananas.
Does this say bananas or gum?
I couldn't even hazard a guess to what it was. I couldn't even get to gum. Because I was like, I don't have any idea what this is. Is this buns? Is this... I knew there was a B in it, and then I was like, okay. It's bananas. Obviously, there's bananas. My capital letters are all really good. So
there you go.
If you're listening to this episode, you're probably wondering what your handwriting is saying about you. And so we wanted to kind of go through this a little bit. I want you to take a second to, just a quick activity. You can pause the episode if you want. Write out something real quick that's got all, or, that maybe write out a couple sentences so that you can have a few different letters and different words and kind of to capture this, because I think this will be a lot of fun. Abraham, if you can't see, for those of you patrons can see, he was skywriting, but if you want to write down on paper, that's fine too. So the first thing they start analyzing is this idea of slant, and slant is used to evaluate the emotional expressiveness of the writer. So as the slant moves more vertical, they are said to keep their emotions in check. A right slant means that the person is very expressive. So that means from the bottom, it's slanting to the right. And a left slant means the person is emotional, but won't show it. So that's meaning from the bottom slanting to the left. They kind of hide their emotions.
Size. The size of someone's handwriting helps identify how much space they had on the page when they were writing. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's meant to help identify someone's mindset. Essentially, if they write in larger characters, that is representative of how much space they think they deserve. But small handwriting indicates concentration and focus, or as I said, lack of page.
So, okay, to analyze my handwriting right now, just real quick. My slant tells me that I have more of a right slant, so I tend to be more expressive. The size of my handwriting is small, so I tend to concentrate and focus, but I think I deserve less space based on what this is saying.
Mine says I don't have any emotions, but I think I need lots of space.
So you have very big, straight handwriting.
Yeah.
Okay, I have very small, like it's almost like just shitty cursive.
Yeah, mine is sort of a blend of hieroglyphs and scratches.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's just a bunch of pictures at this point in time. Now there's the signature line. So I want to take a second to break this down because I think this one's interesting. An extra large capital letter in your name tells people that you have lots of confidence and courage. It also, if someone's signature style matches the rest of their writing, that person is transparent. If you have an unreadable signature, that person is private. So knowing that, what does that say about your personality, Abraham?
I guess transparent, because both versions of it just look like, again, a combination of hieroglyphs and scratches.
Apparently, I'm confident. You could see the first letters in my name, and they're very big, but the rest is illegible. So I'm apparently a very private person based on that. Like it looks like scribbles on mine.
I'm not very confident. I just need a lot of space. Actually, except when I'm signing my name, I tend to sign a little bit smaller, so I'm a little bit more focused when I'm cursive.
Interesting.
Let's talk about freehand writing.
Yeah.
This is when someone gives you a free hand from the morgue.
I got 3 hands.
Lined paper is too limiting. When you write on unlined paper, it tells you so much more about your personality. An upward tilt of your writing is an indicator that you have an optimistic outlook on life. Oh my God. If your writing begins to slant downward, it might be time to get evaluated for depression. And a straight line just means you're moving toward your goals in a consistent way. And those are the only 3.
Yeah, I like the idea that like a straight line, if you write straight, it means you're moving towards your goal. But like in that moment, your goal is to write on the paper. So yeah, I think anytime I'm adding more words, I'm working towards that goal of writing the sentence.
Right.
Oh, so now I think the most important thing that came out of this, though, is the letter T. Now, based on the letter T alone, and there are whole analyses on the letter I, whether you dot your I's, whether you don't cross, there's no I bars and all that stuff. But the letter T holds the secret to your personality.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
There are at least 13 different personality trait markers that you can identify just from the letter T alone.
Okay.
So long crossbars indicate high enthusiasm, but a T that looks like a star indicates high motivation. If your crossbar on your T ends at a sharp point, it means that you're sarcastic because you use your pointed wit as a weapon against people. It's so Abraham, I'm going to send you some aspirin because I can tell that this is giving you a headache.
This is so I mean, we're through the point where we've, I think, unpacked what the presumed hypotheses about what handwriting is supposed to tell you about your personality. It's such bullshit. It's quite smelly, sticky, diarrheal bullshit. Much like ads. Okay, we're going to pontificate on this for just a moment, I think, to understand. Like, we need to dig into the weeds of this. First, as we said, all of the things that we've said about what your handwriting says about you and your personality, based on nothing. Who makes those decisions? Yeah. Who goes through and gets to determine, well, a slant this way means this, and a tilt this way means that, and a T this way means this? Like, just completely made up, based on nothing. There is no science there, and we'll talk more about why, but let's get into a more scientific view of, and skeptical view, I think, of handwriting analysis as it pertains to personality and therefore tangentially to fighting crimes.
Right. So overall, this handwriting analysis part that we're talking about, what we're finding is the field of it is shifting from attempting to identify personality traits towards evaluating neurodegenerative disorders or diseases. So like you're kind of seeing this personality thing really fall by the wayside. There's not a lot of people who are considered analysts in this area who are doing this work like that anymore. What they're doing is they're using it as kind of a supplemental assessment for these neurodegenerative disorders. Basically what happens is as the neurodegenerative disease starts to kind of accelerate, changes in handwriting could be evaluated as a sign of the disease's advancement. As for research relating to personality, It's scant. Most of the research kind of talks about some discussion about proposing future research, but nothing is showing up from it. There's not a lot of experiments that could demonstrate causation. And there are really just, it's kind of disappeared as far as like kind of what we understand of traditional graphology, whether it's holistic or it's kind of quote unquote scientific.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
There was a study. Champa and Ananda Kumar in 2010 presented a proposed methodology for moving handwriting analysis to digital processes, or graphology. This article isn't an experiment, to be clear, but rather discussion on how to remove humans from the analysis process by moving towards some automation and, computerization, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Essentially, computers would be used to predict human behavior and personality based on handwriting analysis.
Right.
Again, and move away from the subjective human-led analysis of penmanship.
So it was just a proposed model, no experiment, no anything like that, which I thought was interesting. But there were some more recent studies that talked about kind of looking at those neurodegenerative disorders and diseases that are coming up. And so this is where I think we start seeing a little bit more of the hard science and actual analysis take place. So Thomas Lenka and Kumar in 2017, this is a different Kumar than the article that we talked about before, began to look at some variables related to handwriting, specifically related to stages of Parkinson's disease. Specifically, what they did was they researched micrographia, which is an acquired disorder related to small or cramped handwriting. And it kind of, as nerves in the hand start to degenerate in the arm and kind of your penmanship, what happens is you start kind of like losing a little bit of that and your handwriting gets smaller, cramped, and more illegible. So rather than focusing on global changes in handwriting quality, they actually evaluated specific variables that were related to someone's handwriting. That included velocity of the writing, fluency in written words, and this micrographia. And so researchers actually specifically coined the term PD dysgraphia, Parkinson's disease dysgraphia, as a means to distinguish between commonly developed micrographia and degenerated handwriting related to Parkinson's disease.
And they did also cite that using a digitized tablet might be a factor in evaluating handwriting due to a history of learning, which is important because that is a thing that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
However, the use of a digitized tablet was easier to measure the variables listed above because it sort of can automatically quantify and qualify all of those components based on pre-programmed settings, of course, but it does do it faster and more automatically and relatively consistently.
Right. I thought that was kind of cool. I mean, you figure like the generation that is typically exposed or has the issue with Parkinson's disease is a little bit older. So tablets might not be as kind of part of the zeitgeist for them. And so as generations get older, tablets and kind of digitized media like that is going to be more commonplace. So that's something that is definitely worth considering as part of that. De Stefano et al. In 2019 actually takes a look at some processes and guidelines for using this type of analysis for identifying diseases. So they actually had taken some studies and they looked at a few studies and looked at how the handwriting analysis was evaluated and how they could look at specific factors related to those neurodegenerative diseases. And so because they noticed that this was a fairly new line of research, they did cite that more research was needed, but they did provide a glimpse of what has been done so far and different criterion and different quantifiable variables that were related to handwriting in relation to these diseases. They started looking at that and starting putting together some guidelines for that, which I thought was good.
Got it. Okay, there are a couple things that I would like to spend a little time unpacking in how I think it makes it relatively it's scientific and skeptical in understanding what we could possibly learn from handwriting and how it relates to things like personality. And I think it helps to understand the variables that affect penmanship and handwriting to begin with, and also what personality is. Because if we just examine those things separately, I think it starts to become pretty clear how impossible this task is that they've set up for themselves. Because considering the handwriting, the penmanship side of things, how does penmanship develop? Through practice, through someone having some kind of writing utensil in their hand and something on which to use that writing utensil, through instruction that they may have been given. The people who sit and practice and try and make their letters look good versus the people whose motivation is to get it over with as quickly as possible. The people who work at their penmanship to make it look presentable, legible, potentially to make it look unique, potentially to look highly stylistic. They work on their fine motor control. Those are things that are shaped up over time that are often going to start as things external to them. People who, like, they might be pressured by their friends, like, ew, your handwriting is ugly. And so then they feel a need to change it. Or your handwriting is beautiful. And so they feel a need to maybe even improve it further, or practice writing it more so that they can recruit more opportunities for people to tell them how lovely their handwriting is. There are so many circumstances that go into the amount of time someone spends focusing on building up their handwriting, that like that by itself is going to be a hugely complex intertwining web of variables that affected just the development of penmanship and handwriting for each individual person. And I mean, we're just talking thousands of variables that are at play, including the visual feedback they get from producing their own penmanship.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, handwriting in itself is a learned behavior, right?
Yes.
So like
exactly.
That's really ultimately what it comes down to. Handwriting, penmanship, all of that. Penmanship and like the written word is the result of a learned behavior.
Yes, good point.
And we have kind of established over time that personality in itself is most of the time just a collection of behavioral patterns that we evaluate and kind of look at that are a result of long learning histories, and kind of like, and even then personality is not really useful to look at when we're starting to look at these types of behavioral outcomes. And so I think at the end of the day, equating this learned behavior to a type of person is not in any way, shape, or form helpful, like at all.
Right.
Where I see use in all this stuff is like confirming authorship, because if you're looking at historians and archaeological digs and stuff like that, I think that might be helpful. But even then, that gets a little bit tedious. I think using it in the medical model, looking at like behavioral deterioration and stuff, I think that is super, super valuable, super helpful.
Certainly could be.
I think there are uses for this space, but not in the way that graphology has been kind of marketed for all these years. I think people really like that stuff. I think people really like the insight on like who they are as a person. I mean, we just recorded an episode on mood rings.
Yeah.
And just kind of talking about like that idea of the insight of just kind of knowing deeper about who you are. I think that's kind of intriguing, and the mystery of that is always there, just as from the armchair psychology perspective here.
Yeah. This is very much a reading the tea leaves sort of thing.
The way that I kind of look at it is this idea of graphology is just, it's the forensic equivalent to palm reading. Like, to me, that's what this is.
Absolutely.
It focuses on large scoping guesses based on general personality traits or demographic characteristics. It does not do the thing that it sets out to do from the identifying personality traits perspective. From the other states, we need more research, but from that perspective, it doesn't do the thing that people think it does.
Yeah, and then you sort of alluded to this, but in addition to talking about the fact that it is learned, that it is developed over time, and that the circumstances around its development are vastly complex and intertwined. I mean, you might imagine that a sociopath and a philanthropist, end up at the same as children, the same place for learning their handwriting, and they might have very similar handwriting and very different personalities because they just happen to be taught by someone who like used a particular style in having them practice their penmanship. Not that there's a lot of specific penmanship or handwriting schools that people do, but like people do get some kind of instruction and feedback and that sort of thing. And so that is a really important consideration there. And another one is that our penmanship evolves over time. As we get older and as we change, we are not going to be writing consistently. Even people who spend time having nice penmanship, it will change and shift over time.
Sure.
And for those of us who are just fluent in their penmanship, such as myself, like it will change from letter to letter, from word to word in a single paragraph. I'm like trying out different styles still at this age to find how I like to write something, how I like to form the letter, how I feel like it needs to be spaced out and that sort of thing. So it's an evolving thing that changes. There's also like the medical side of things, as you said, is if you had some kind of neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's, like that will affect it. If you have arthritis, if you're cold, if you have like a writing implement that doesn't work very well and you're having to press harder or, trying to shake it to get ink out or something.
if you have an acquired traumatic brain injury, then that's going to drastically, I mean, like, think about that. Like, okay, so now you have this head injury that is going to change the way that you write entirely because you've lost all of your motor skills. That doesn't mean that your entire personality has changed or you're a different person. It just simply means that you have lost an actual skill based on the fact that your brain suffered a significant injury. So I think it's really fascinating to be like, okay, this person is different because they had an injury. It's like, well, maybe they have mood swings or maybe they have, other things that have happened as a result of that head injury. It doesn't mean that they're a different person. It's still Abraham with the head injury or Shane with the head injury. It's still this person. So I always found like that part of it fascinating too. It's like, okay, so because somebody hit their head a little bit too hard, now all of a sudden they're an entirely different person. I don't really buy that to that level.
And then there's also, I think, looking at the circumstance of like, are you writing to communicate with another person, or are you writing a note for yourself? Are you in a hurry or do you have time? Are you writing for a like particular thing? Like you're writing like, a sign to get someone's attention versus you're writing to jot down an idea. Like all of those things will affect your penmanship as well. So we've got, your learning history, your medical condition, your immediate prevailing circumstances. And then we talk about things like personality, which, as you said, is just like things that we tend to do. Right. Personality seems to just refer to like things that we tend to do. And that is extremely dynamic and not at all static and will change again, moment to moment, because it's largely as your learning history sort of shapes, you do build momentum around certain habits and that sort of thing. But any variable can throw a wrench in the mix and completely alter something that you used to do one way that you now do completely differently. Understanding that personality is also this thing that's in development, that's based on your circumstances, that's based on your learning history, and has to do with overall patterns and like trends and what you might expect someone to do in a given situation. Like trying to then superimpose that system of someone's personality, a thing that we like can barely define and that we know essentially is this loose dynamic set of maybes, on top of an evolving set of penmanship skills, and then trying to say that like the way that you wrote your I tells you something about, like, we're basically presuming that whatever the thing is that's developing in terms of your personality, your learning history, your circumstances, your brain, your medical conditions is now also glimpsable through your penmanship of all things. I mean, penmanship is a behavior and therefore it is a thing that you do and therefore does have tendencies, but trying to look at that as like the bubbling to the surface to like, this is where we're going to glimpse someone's personality through their penmanship, to me is this is dozens of leaps of assumption, interpretation of like playing fast and loose with the idea that those things are closely enough related that we could draw any kind of meaningful connection between one and the other.
It's tedious. It's tenuous at best is what I meant to say. Like best case scenario, like you're going to get maybe in the same continent, right? Like you're not even going to get in a ballpark. You're going to get in the same continent making that decision or like making those interpretations. Like that is the closest that you're going to get to using this. You might get lucky every now and again, but ultimately like none of it matters.
Right.
I mean, nothing really matters if you want to get into it. Nothing really matters. And we can recognize that. Maybe I'm having an existential crisis right now, but at the end of all of this, my point is more so that it's not as useful as people think it is. And I think that's kind of where I land on all that.
It fundamentally can't do what it says that it does. It can't. Like, I think if you understand anything about what personality is and how it works, and understand anything about penmanship and how it develops, those two things just do not predict one another in any level of clarity that means anything to anybody. That being said, I think if you know someone well enough, you learn to read the little like mannerisms and things that show up that I think reveal something about sort of where they're at presently, that if you know someone really well, you might actually be able to tell from many different products of their behavior what kind of sort of mood they're in. I mean, just the rapidity at which someone answers a question might tell you a lot about that person if you know that person well, right? You're like, oh, when they answer fast, they're upset, or when they answer fast, they're excited, or, whatever it might be. Any little mannerism or thing you can interpret. And so to those people, they might even be able to read someone's penmanship, assuming that they read their handwriting often enough to be able to draw any conclusions about it and have a little bit more insight about it. But these broad strokes terms of like a pointed T or a slanted letter or a star-like T or a dot over the I, those are not going to tell you something about someone without already knowing a lot about that person. And even then, tenuous.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Whew. Well, that's more of my voice than most people want or deserve in their lifetime. Let's take a quick advertisement break, and then we can take this home.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's hit some take-home points here.
Yeah, handwriting analyses aren't used to identify personality for a few reasons. We've kind of extrapolated on that a little bit. It's often used as an additional evaluation and not a primary assessment at this point in time. And it's a pseudoscience. I mean, what we're talking about here, when we're talking about identifying personality based on handwriting, it's a pseudoscience.
Yeah.
And I kind of already explained it before, is that the use of this is the equivalent of forensic palm reading. Like, it doesn't really do the things that it thinks it does, because it's just using sweeping generalizations and demographic information to make large scale assumptions, not necessarily enough about that specific person.
Yeah. The closest thing that we can get to having a functional handwriting analysis process is to help determine authorship, but even then it's fairly spotty. If we can't even determine like a gender of somebody, which again, unpacking a huge can of worms in terms of what that even could possibly mean. We've talked about gender on this show. We understand that gender is a dynamic, socially constructed thing.
Right.
But when they break it down into a binary and can't even do that much, let alone try to tell what handwriting belongs to a person or what their penmanship says about their personality. I mean, it's moved so far beyond the realm of plausible or making any amount of sense that it's kind of laughable, really.
Right.
And I think that like maybe it's worth doing like a little bit more of a deep dive on how this relates to forensic handwriting analysis, and like even dig into a story where this has failed, or even where it's, they've got lucky and where it's worked. But I think just saying that in terms of using this as a tool to understand someone's personality, it does not do that thing. It is bad at it.
Right. Exactly. At the end of the day, people's handwriting is so varied and so different that like there's just no way to come up with a standard. And I mean, there are handwriting analyses in different languages as well, especially languages that are not like Latin based. When you have like something like different types of languages that use symbols versus like specific letters, like there are handwriting analyses in those spaces. But again, they're just kind of not quite the same.
Right.
Like it doesn't have the same analysis.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have anything to add before we sort of wrap up here and give our recommendations?
No, I feel like this is another pseudoscience we have debunked. So you shouldn't see it anymore, because we have done God's work in getting rid of this thing.
The world is effectively altered by our podcast episodes.
Yep.
In case you didn't know. We are going to get to some recommendations, but in the meantime, if you would like to support the show, you can leave a rating and review, subscribe, tell a friend, follow us on Spotify if that's where you listen to us. You can pick up some merch. If you'd like to tell us about your experiences with handwriting analysis and personality, or even forensic handwriting analysis, you can email us directly at info@wwd.podcast.com, or reach out to us on the social media platforms at wwd.podcast.
Yes.
If you do join us on Patreon, you get extra perks and benefits, such as you get early releases of episodes, you get ad-free episodes, other back sort of behind the scenes content. And the group of people that do that we also like to shout out for all of their generosity includes Mike M, Megan, Layla, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, and Ashley. Thank you all so much. You are just amazing, and we really appreciate you. And anyone you can be on that list. You can help join them. You can support as little or as much as you would like, and all of it helps us out. So if you can even spare $1 a month, you can join the Cool Kids Club over here.
Yep,
is what I'm deciding to call it right now.
The coolest kids.
That's right. In addition, I must thank my team writing and fact checking from Shane and myself. Music editing and other overall sound production comes from Justin. And our social media coordinator is Emma Wilson. But before I think we wrap up, I think that we are going to share some recommendations.
Yay!
Recommendations.
So I'm going to recommend something I never thought I would recommend ever in my life. I am personally not a fan of musicals. I do not like them. I think that they are exhausting. I don't know why. That's just a personal thing that I've had an issue with. But recently I went on a trip to New York and I got to see Aladdin the musical on Broadway. And let me tell you, it was so fun.
Wow.
The production was really great. A lot of really cool, like, stage magic. Like, there's a lot of really fun stuff with that. The genie was incredible. Just like the guy that played him, his name is Michael James Scott.
Okay.
Absolutely incredible.
Michael Scott?
Michael Scott, yeah. Speaking of George Foreman, he was limping around because he did burn his foot on a George Foreman grill getting out of bed.
Well, so many connections right now.
I know, it's so wild. But Michael James Scott plays a genie. He's really great. They do some really cool like clothing magic and stuff. It's like real, the quick change outfits. The guy that plays Aladdin, Michael Maliakel, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Really good Aladdin, great singer.
Nice.
A lot of fun. Sonia Balsara is Jasmine. She's really great in it. And then you've got, they changed a couple of the elements of the story. You had Don Daryl Rivera, who plays Iago. And Iago is a person, not a parrot. And they kind of make jokes and references to that in the story as well. It was a really cool kind of reimagining of Aladdin, and it was a lot of fun and a lot of really interesting kind of visual jokes to go along with it. It was really great. It was such a great experience, and I would absolutely go and see a show on Broadway again because of it.
Oh, fun. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I tend to feel similarly about musicals. Mostly, I feel like when it feels like they're shoehorning song into things that either don't drive the plot or drive the plot way too much, it just feels unnecessary. But I've seen some great musicals.
Yeah.
I thought Hairspray was really good. I thought Book of Mormon was really good. So I think it all just depends on the musical. But I tend to not seek them out, but I have seen some good ones. So
yeah, that's fair.
All right. Aladdin the musical on Broadway. That's your recommendation. I'm recommending a movie that I am probably the last person to see. So I probably don't need to recommend it because everyone here has seen it maybe more than once. And this is the Barbie movie that came out this year. This was just a fabulous movie. Again, everyone's seen it, so I don't need to explain. But it's got this surreal, over-the-top quality to it. The acting and directing was just fantastic. It's a little bit cartoonish and silly, but also very real and a lot of human emotion. I think a lot of commentary on sort of the world and our culture and society that was done beautifully. Like, even if you weren't there for the commentary, it's still just a great movie to watch.
Yeah,
it's really funny. The delivery are really good. They're both really subtle and overt, and everyone just absolutely crushed it in their role. Fantastic directing, set designs, costumes. It was just really, really, and so many little Easter eggy things. I think a lot of people that I certainly didn't catch them all, but I caught a few here and there. But then little aesthetic touches that I think were really impressively well done. So they really thought this movie out well and did a great job.
Yeah, they did a great job with it. One of my favorite facts about the movie is that they caused a worldwide pink shortage because of the amount of pink paint they used in it. Like, they caused a worldwide shortage as a result of this movie. So I thought that was fun.
As I said, I was the last person to see it, so everyone's ahead of me. Anyway, I think that's all we have to say about Barbie or Aladdin. As I said, please email us, reach out to us on social media. We look forward to hearing from all of you. If you haven't reached out to us before, you should give it a shot because we are here for it.
Yes.
Thank you as always so much to everybody who listened. Thank you for recording with me today, Shane. Is there anything that I forgot or that you would like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Poo-poo, handwriting analysis. Judgment from why we do what we do. Disapprove.
I can't wait to get that stamp in the mail. I ordered it earlier, so it should be on the way.
All right. Anyway, I think that's it. So this is Abraham.
This is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.